problem isn't that he humiliated me. The problem is that I remembered.
My wife Rachel has been with this company for about 3 years now, working her way up from analyst to senior manager through pure hustle and talent. She's incredible at what she does, always has been. About 3 weeks ago, though, she started acting really strange. Not cheating strange, but corporate zombie strange. Suddenly, every conversation was about brand image, quarterly targets, and team synergy. I've been married to this woman for 8 years, and I know when something's off. She'd come home from work looking exhausted but weirdly energized, like she'd just finished running a marathon through a motivational poster factory. Her laptop was always open, phone constantly buzzing. When I'd ask what was going on, she'd give me these vague answers about quarterly reviews and strategic initiatives that made my eyes glaze over. There's only so many nights a man can have deep conversations with his microwave before questioning his life choices. Then, one evening, I overheard her on the phone with a friend. Okay, fine. I was totally eavesdropping while pretending to look for my coffee mug in the kitchen. She was talking about this massive gala her boss Derek was throwing for the new downtown branch opening. Crystal chandeliers, live band, enough champagne to baptize a yacht, the whole 9 yards. Here's the kicker, though. She specifically told her friend that spouses weren't really expected to attend because it was more of a professional networking thing. She said, "I don't want my husband there, and I'm not entirely sure why." That should have concerned both of us, right? Now here's the thing about me and red flags. Most people see them and think maybe I should proceed with caution and have a mature conversation about my feelings. Me? I see a red flag and immediately think, challenge accepted. Let's turn this into a social experiment. Because apparently I never learned that curiosity eliminated the cat. Or maybe I just figured I've got 8 lives left and I'm feeling lucky. I made an executive decision right there in my kitchen, still holding that stupid coffee mug I'd been looking for as an excuse to lurk near her phone conversation. I was going to crash this party like a YouTube prankster with nothing to lose. My assistant, Chris, God bless him, he's like a millennial version of Alfred from Batman if Alfred wore skinny jeans and had opinions about oat milk, caught wind of my plan the next morning when I casually mentioned needing Friday evening free. Chris is one of those people who's so organized that he color codes his color coding system. So naturally, his first instinct was to reach for his tablet and start typing up a formal RSVP like we were attending a royal wedding. "Sir, I can send over your details to the event coordinator," he said, fingers already hovering over the keyboard with enthusiasm of someone who genuinely enjoys administrative tasks. "We should probably confirm dietary restrictions, parking arrangements, and whether you need a +1 registered in the system." I looked at him with what I hoped was a mixture of paternal wisdom and barely contained mischief. "No need, Chris," I said, watching his face do that thing where he tries to hide his concern but fails miserably because his eyebrows betray him every single time. "Let's make it a surprise." Nothing says romance like public confusion and the faint possibility of security escorting me out. I could see him calculating the probability of disaster in his head, running through scenarios like he was preparing for a TED Talk. But to his credit, he just sighed, closed his tablet, and muttered something about updating my liability insurance, which I chose to interpret as enthusiastic support. The thing is, I wasn't just doing this because I missed Rachel, though I absolutely did miss her. 3 weeks of her coming home late and being weirdly distant had left me eating dinner alone more times than I cared to admit. No, I was doing this primarily because curiosity has always been my favorite form of chaos. Some people skydive, some people buy sports cars they can't afford. Me? I show up uninvited to corporate events just to see what happens when you throw a wrench into a perfectly planned machine. Friday evening, I stood in my closet picking out what to wear to an event I technically wasn't invited to. I settled on a charcoal gray suit, not too flashy, not too casual, the kind of outfit that says I could either be a guest or someone who's about to serve you documents, and you won't know which until it's too late. Rachel had already left an hour earlier, claiming she needed to get there early to help with setup, which I found suspicious considering she'd never voluntarily arrived early to anything in her entire life, including our wedding. I checked myself in the mirror one last time, adjusted my tie, and couldn't help but smile at my own reflection. "Jason," I said to myself, because talking to your reflection is totally normal and not at all a sign that you should reconsider your evening plans, you're either about to have the best night of your life or you're about to become a cautionary tale that Chris tells at parties. Either way, it's going to be interesting. I grabbed my keys, sent Chris a text that just said, "Wish me luck." He immediately responded with a gif of a dumpster fire and 3 concerned emojis. The drive downtown gave me way too much time to think about what I was actually doing and whether this qualified as healthy relationship behavior or if I was crossing some line that would eventually require couples therapy and a lot of apologetic flowers. But here's the thing about gut feelings. Sometimes they're indigestion from that sketchy food truck you insisted was authentic. And sometimes they're your subconscious screaming that something's off and you need to pay attention. My gut was currently performing an entire Broadway musical about how something was definitely, absolutely, 100% not right with this whole situation. As I pulled into the parking garage near the venue, watching all these dressed-up people streaming toward the building like ants heading to a very expensive picnic, I felt that last little whisper of doubt try to talk me out of this. You could just turn around, it said. You could go home, order pizza, watch that documentary about weird crimes, and pretend you never had this idea. But I've never been good at listening to the reasonable voice in my head, mostly because the unreasonable voice is so much more entertaining. So I got out of the car, straightened my jacket, and walked toward the building with the confidence of someone who absolutely belonged there, even though we both knew I absolutely, definitely, spectacularly did not. The night air was crisp, the kind that makes you feel alive and slightly reckless. As I approached the entrance, where a bored-looking guy with a clipboard was checking names, I realized I hadn't actually planned how I was going to get past the velvet rope of corporate exclusivity. But sometimes the best plans are no plans at all, just pure momentum and the unwavering belief that if you walk like you own the place, people assume you do, which, in a twist of irony that would become apparent very soon, wasn't actually that far from the truth. I walked right up to that entrance like I'd personally funded the entire event. The event was pure, pretentious glitter, the kind of setup that screams we have money and we need everyone to know it without actually saying it out loud because that would be tacky. Crystal lights hung from the ceiling like frozen fireworks, catching the light and throwing it around the room. The appetizers looked like they'd been designed by architects rather than chefs, tiny, geometric, and way too beautiful to actually eat. Which I'm pretty sure was the point, because if people are too intimidated to touch the food, you save money on catering. Everywhere I looked, people were standing in those weird corporate clusters holding champagne flutes like they were props in a stage play about success, laughing at jokes that probably weren't funny, but had been told by someone important enough that laughing was basically a career move. The moment I walked in, and I mean the exact microsecond my shoes hit that polished marble floor, I could feel the atmosphere drop about 3 degrees. You know that feeling when you walk into a room and suddenly realize everyone's dress code memo went to their inbox but somehow skipped yours? Except in this case, it wasn't about the clothes. It was about my entire existence being an unexpected variable in their carefully calculated evening. Eyes swiveled toward me like I was a glitch in the Matrix. You'd think I had walked in wearing flip-flops and a mysterious stained t-shirt, not a perfectly acceptable charcoal suit that probably cost more than half the outfits in this room. I spotted Rachel across the room almost immediately, because my wife has this way of standing that's uniquely hers. Shoulders back, chin up, like she's perpetually ready to either accept an award or fight someone, depending on the situation. She was talking to a group of colleagues. Her laugh a little too loud, a little too performed, and I felt that pang of something I couldn't quite name. Was it jealousy? Concern? The jury was still out. Before I could make my way over to her, I got intercepted by the man himself. Derek, Rachel's boss, spotted me from across the room with the kind of radar that only middle management develops after years of monitoring employee bathroom breaks. He made his way toward me with that power walk that guys perfect in front of mirrors, probably while listening to motivational podcasts about alpha males. His smile was what I can only describe as aggressively friendly, the kind that doesn't quite reach the eyes, because the eyes are too busy calculating whether you're useful or irrelevant. "Oh, you must be Rachel's husband," he said, extending a hand that gripped mine with just a little too much pressure, like he was trying to assert dominance through handshake PSI alone. I smiled back, matching his energy with the kind of pleasant neutrality that drives aggressive personalities absolutely insane. "That's me," I said. "Guilty as charged, Your Honor." He laughed at that like I'd said something clever, which I hadn't. But I'd learned a long time ago that powerful people are so used to others laughing at their jokes that they assume everyone else's comments are equally hilarious. "You're the handyman, right?" he asked. And there it was, that casual condescension wrapped in a question mark, the verbal equivalent of patting someone on the head while standing on a stepladder. Now, I could have corrected him right there. Could have dropped the bomb that would have made his smile crack like cheap china. But where's the fun in revealing your hand before you've even seen the flop? So instead, I went with misdirection, my favorite magic trick. Only on weekends, I replied, keeping my tone light and breezy, like we were discussing the weather instead of him casually insulting my career. During weekdays, I build other people's futures. I watched his face do that thing where the brain tries to process whether what I just said was profound or pretentious, ultimately landing on probably both. But I'll laugh anyway, because I'm the boss and that's what I do. He laughed, really laughed, like I delivered the punchline to a joke he didn't quite get, but didn't want to admit it. The people around him, his little entourage of corporate yes-men and yes-women with their plastered-on smiles and nervous energy, chuckled too, probably out of that primal fear of unemployment that makes office workers laugh at things that aren't funny. Derek clapped me on the shoulder with that fake camaraderie that managers think creates team bonding, but actually just creates resentment. "Well, good for you, buddy," he said. "And I hate being called buddy by people who aren't my buddies. It's great that Rachel has such a supportive partner who understands her career comes first." The way he said it made supportive partner sound like a participation trophy. I took a sip of champagne from a passing tray, mostly to give myself something to do with my hands, besides making fists, and surveyed the room with fresh eyes. This wasn't just a party, it was a theatrical production. And Derek was the self-appointed director, moving from group to group like a politician working a rally, making sure everyone knew he was the center of this particular universe. As the evening progressed and the champagne flowed like someone had broken a dam made entirely of expensive French grapes, Derek really hit his stride, working the room like a game show host who'd forgotten this wasn't actually his show. He started this impromptu speech about his company's expansion using possessive pronouns with alarming frequency. My company, my vision, my team. He conveniently forgot that his entire operational budget came from a board of directors he'd never actually met face to face. Well, technically he'd met one of them, except he didn't know it yet, because that particular board member was currently standing 3 feet away from him, sipping mediocre champagne and contemplating whether corporate sabotage via truth-telling counted as a misdemeanor or just good entertainment. This expansion, Derek announced to a captive audience of employees who literally couldn't leave without it being noted on their performance reviews, represents everything we've built together as a team. I nearly choked on my drink at that one because we was doing some seriously heavy lifting in that sentence. The man had this gift for making collective achievements sound like personal victories. But the real kicker came when he spotted Rachel in the crowd and his face lit up. He navigated through the crowd with that purposeful stride, and before I could process what was happening, he'd wrapped an arm around my wife's shoulder with a casualness that made my eye twitch involuntarily. "She's our brightest employee," he proclaimed, loudly enough that half the room turned to look. "You should be proud she married up." Now, let me tell you something about that phrase, married up. It's one of those supposedly complimentary things that's actually just an insult, wearing a party hat and pretending to be festive. It implies a hierarchy, a ladder, a ranking system where one person is objectively better than the other. And in this case, Derek was heavily suggesting that my wife had climbed the social ladder by marrying me, which would theoretically make him the peak of this metaphorical mountain. I sipped my champagne slowly, buying myself exactly 3 seconds to decide whether I was going to let this slide or whether I was going to start lighting matches in this powder keg of a conversation. Spoiler alert, I've never been good at letting things slide. "Oh, I'm extremely proud," I said, my voice dripping with the kind of sweetness that warns of incoming sarcasm. "Some people climb ladders. Others just stand at the top and watch. The air around us got thick enough to cut with a knife. That special kind of tension that happens when someone says something that could be interpreted as either profound wisdom or a direct insult." Derek's face went through this fascinating journey of expressions. First confusion, then a flicker of suspicion that maybe I'd just insulted him. But he couldn't quite figure out how, and finally landing on that fake laugh that people use when they're not sure if they should be offended. Rachel was doing this thing where she was smiling, but also looked like she wanted the floor to open up and swallow her whole, which I recognized as her, my husband, is causing a scene expression. I'd seen it before at dinner parties, family reunions, and that one time at the grocery store when I got into a philosophical debate with the cashier. The little crowd that had gathered around us was now doing that thing where they pretend they're not listening while obviously hanging on every word, their eyes darting between Derek and me like spectators at a tennis match. I positioned myself strategically near the buffet table, partly because I was actually hungry after skipping dinner in my excitement to crash this party, and partly because the buffet table offered an excellent vantage point for people watching without looking like a creep. The shrimp were pretty good, I'll give them that. Definitely not the frozen garbage you get at budget conferences. While I was contemplating whether it would be socially acceptable to just camp out next to the cocktail sauce for the rest of the evening, I became acutely aware that I'd become the subject of several whispered conversations happening at various points around the room. You know that feeling when you can't hear exactly what people are saying, but you can feel the weight of their judgment? Employees were giving me these side eyes that they thought were subtle, but were about as discreet as a foghorn at a library. I caught fragments of conversations as people passed by the buffet table. "That's her husband," one woman in a navy pantsuit whispered to her colleague, her tone suggesting she'd expected someone either significantly more impressive or significantly less. "He looks normal," another guy added, and I wasn't sure if that was a compliment or an insult. Derek, because the universe has a sense of humor, and that sense of humor is mostly ironic, decided this was the perfect moment to make another appearance in my evening. He strutted by with the confidence of a peacock who'd just discovered mirrors. He stopped when he saw me, his face doing that thing where he was clearly trying to remember if he'd already talked to me or if all unimportant people just blurred together in his mind. "So what do you do for a living?" He snapped his fingers like that would somehow summon my name from the void, which was particularly rich considering he'd already asked me this exact question earlier. "Jason," I supplied, helpfully popping another shrimp into my mouth because if I was going to be interrogated about my career choices, I was at least going to do it while eating free food. And I dabble in real estate. You could say I have a few properties under management. I kept my tone casual, like I was discussing a hobby rather than a business portfolio. "Oh, like rentals?" he asked, and there it was again, that voice that could make even genuine questions sound condescending. He said rentals the way someone might say adorable while patting a puppy. "More like entire buildings," I replied, casually reaching for a napkin because shrimp cocktail is delicious but messy. I said it with the same energy someone might use to correct a minor detail, giving no indication that I'd just dropped information that should have made his brain perform emergency calculations. He laughed again, and at this point I was starting to think maybe Derek just laughed at everything as a defense mechanism. Well, good for you. Must be nice to have a wife who brings home the big bucks. He said it loud enough that several people nearby turned to look, and I saw Rachel across the room physically wince, her shoulders tensing up. The implication was clear. In Derek's worldview, I was a kept man living off my wife's salary, probably spending my days watching daytime television. "Yeah," I said, my smile getting wider because I could feel the punchline building in my chest. "She really owns this place." I let the words hang in the air, perfectly ambiguous, technically true in multiple ways that Derek's brain was definitely not processing because he was too busy enjoying what he thought was agreement with his assessment of our marriage dynamic. Rachel coughed into her wine glass across the room, a sound that I recognized as her "oh God, what is he doing now?" cough. Halfway through the night, when the champagne had sufficiently loosened everyone's professional facades and the room had reached that perfect level of corporate buzz, Derek decided it was time for a toast. Because of course he did. You can't have a party celebrating Derek without Derek making a speech about Derek thinly disguised as appreciation for everyone else. He tapped a spoon against his champagne glass, with the kind of theatrical flair that suggested he'd been practicing this moment in his bathroom mirror. The crystal made this perfect little ringing sound that cut through the conversations, and everyone obediently stopped talking and turned toward him. The room fell into that expectant silence that happens when the boss wants attention. "Ladies and gentlemen," Derek boomed, his voice taking on that motivational speaker quality. He raised his glass high, champagne sloshing dangerously close to the rim. "Let's toast to success and to the supportive partners who stay home and watch us shine." He delivered that last line with a wink and a gesture in my general direction, like he was doing me a favor by acknowledging my existence. The room erupted in laughter, that specific kind of obligatory office laughter that sounds less like genuine amusement and more like a survival mechanism. People raised their glasses dutifully, their smiles plastered on their faces. I watched as several employees glanced in my direction, with expressions ranging from pity to secondhand embarrassment. My wife smiled nervously, her face doing that thing where she was trying to look like she thought it was funny, while also internally screaming, Her eyes met mine across the room with an apologetic intensity that could have melted steel, and I could practically read her thoughts. Please don't make a scene. Oh God, he's definitely going to make a scene. But here's the thing about me and moments like these. I've never been particularly good at letting condescending nonsense slide by without at least lobbing a verbal grenade in return. When someone takes a shot at you disguised as a compliment, you've got two choices: swallow it and smile, or return fire with interest. And I've always been more of a return fire kind of guy. I raised my own glass, slowly, deliberately, with the kind of casual confidence that comes from knowing something everyone else doesn't. The movement caught Derek's attention, and I saw his face light up with what he probably thought was camaraderie, like we were buddies now. Cheers to bosses who think success is a solo act, I announced, my voice carrying across the room with crystal clarity. I paused for exactly one beat, letting the words sink in just enough that people started doing mental math about whether I just said what they thought I'd said. I'd toast your leadership, but I'm afraid HR policy forbids fiction. The room went from polite laughter to absolutely deafening silence in about half a second. Then slowly, like a wave building before it crashes on the shore, genuine laughter started rippling through the crowd. Not that fake corporate laughter from before, but real, actual amusement from people who'd probably been waiting months or even years for someone to call out Derek's particular brand of self-congratulatory leadership. The intern near the back actually snorted into his drink, then looked absolutely terrified that he'd made an audible sound. A woman from accounting pressed her lips together so hard trying not to laugh that her face turned red, her shoulders shaking with suppressed amusement. Even some of the senior managers couldn't quite hide their smirks behind their champagne glasses. Derek's face went through a fascinating evolution of expressions in the span of about 5 seconds. First came confusion because his brain was still processing whether what I'd said was a compliment wrapped in weird phrasing or an actual insult. Then came the dawning realization as he replayed my words in his head, and his face started to flush that particular shade of red that happens when someone's blood pressure spikes and their ego takes a direct hit simultaneously. His smile twitched at the corners like it was trying to decide whether to stay put or abandon ship entirely. The man hated being outfunnied. You could see it written all over his face. In his world, he was the one who made the jokes. He was the one who got the laughs. Having someone he'd categorized as unimportant flip the script on him in front of his entire staff was probably the social equivalent of getting pantsed at prom. As dessert rolled in, tiny pretentious things that looked like they'd been assembled by surgeons rather than pastry chefs, Derek was clearly regrouping, gathering his wounded pride like a general rallying troops after an unexpected ambush. I could see it in the way he straightened his shoulders, adjusted his tie, and scanned the room with renewed determination. He made his way back over to where I was standing, having migrated from the shrimp station to the dessert table. Because if you're going to watch a man dig his own grave, you might as well do it while eating a chocolate mousse that costs more than most people's lunch budgets. Derek leaned in with that smirk again. "So, Jason," he said, my name dripping with condescension, "how does it feel being married to the real breadwinner?" There are moments in life where you can choose to be the bigger person, to take the high road, to smile and nod and let ignorance slide by without comment. This was not going to be one of those moments. I grinned at him, the kind of smile that probably should have served as a warning label. "Delicious, actually," I said, taking another spoonful of mousse for dramatic effect. Especially since the bread comes from my bakery. I let that hang in the air for exactly 2 seconds, watching his face scrunch up in confusion like he was trying to solve a math problem that didn't have enough numbers. "Sorry." "What?" Derek said, his smirk faltering like a car engine that just realized it was out of gas. Around us, conversations had started to die down again because apparently I'd become the evening's entertainment. I turned toward the CFO, Michelle, who had been sitting quietly at a nearby table for most of the evening, nursing the same glass of wine and watching the proceedings with the tired expression of someone who'd seen this movie before and knew how it ended. Michelle was one of those sharp, no-nonsense women in her 50s who'd probably forgotten more about running a business than Derek would ever learn. "Michelle," I called out, my voice friendly but loud enough that everyone within a 20-foot radius could hear, which at this point was basically everyone. "Could you pass me the check file? The one you and I signed when we approved the new branch budget?" Her fork, which had been halfway to her mouth with what looked like a very expensive piece of cheesecake, froze in midair. Her eyes widened just slightly, and I watched her brain process what I'd just asked, what I'd just implied, and what was about to happen in the next 60 seconds. To her credit, she didn't miss a beat. Michelle hadn't gotten to CFO by being slow on the uptake. "Sir," she said, and that single word dropped into the conversation like a nuclear bomb with a polite accent. The temperature in the room dropped about 15 degrees. Suddenly, everyone's champagne tasted a little different. People shifted in their seats, set down their drinks, turned toward our little tableau like we were the main act in a play they'd accidentally bought tickets for. Derek looked confused, which was fair, because his entire understanding of the corporate hierarchy was currently being challenged in real time. He glanced between me and Michelle like he was watching a tennis match, except instead of a ball being volleyed back and forth, it was his career and reputation. "What file?" he asked, his voice not quite as confident as it had been 30 seconds ago. "What are you talking about?" I could see the wheels turning in his head. Several other senior staff members had gone very still, the kind of still that happens when animals sense a hunter nearby. The VP of operations had gone pale, his dessert fork clattering onto his plate with a sound that echoed in the increasingly quiet room. The head of HR, Patricia, had her hand over her mouth, her eyes darting between Derek and me. "I think," Michelle said slowly, "that Mr. Hayes is referring to the Q3 expansion budget that was approved by the board last quarter." "Mr. Hayes?" Derek repeated, his voice cracking slightly on my last name like it was a foreign word he'd never encountered before. "Wait, Hayes? Like Hayes Industries? Like the company you work for?" "Yes, I finished for him because watching people connect dots in real time is one of my favorite spectator sports." I stood up slowly, taking my time, because moments like these deserve to be savored. I adjusted my jacket with the kind of casual precision that suggested this wasn't a big deal to me, which it wasn't, but was clearly becoming the biggest deal of Derek's entire professional life. The room had gone so quiet you could hear the ice melting in people's drinks, the soft buzz of the crystal chandeliers overhead, and what I'm pretty sure was Derek's heart rate accelerating to dangerous levels. I smiled, and not the fake corporate smile that everyone had been wearing like masks all evening, but a genuine smile. "I'm Jason Hayes," I said, letting the words hit like a hammer. "I'm the main owner and founder of this company. You've been working for me, Derek." I dropped the Mr. on purpose. Nothing shows control like using someone's name without asking. The reaction was instant and loud. A wave of gasps rolled through the room like fans doing the wave at a ballgame. Only this one was pure shock. A glass broke somewhere in the back. Great timing, honestly. The music stopped right as I finished, leaving a silence thick enough to taste. All you could hear was Derek's world collapsing. Phones came out fast, no shame at all. At least 5 people opened LinkedIn to fact-check me. The intern who had laughed earlier looked like he might faint from the drama. Derek actually stammered, something I'd never seen him do. "You're joking," he finally got out, voice cracking. His face drained from red to white to sickly green. You can't be..." "Wouldn't that be nice?" I said, calm as if we were chatting about the weather. I stepped closer. "You've mocked your team, misused company money, and insulted my wife. Not exactly stellar work, huh?" He paled even more. "Sir, he started, and hearing him say sir after all his fake friendliness was a moment worth savoring. "Relax," I cut in. "I'm not firing you here. HR hates extra work at parties." I looked at Patricia, who was already typing notes into her phone. "But by Monday, I want your resignation letter. Perfectly formatted, 1 page, full of that buzzword nonsense you love so much." The room stayed frozen, everyone trying to absorb what just happened. Michelle hid a grin behind her glass. Rachel, across the room, covered her mouth, her eyes wide. Shock, horror, respect. Probably all 3. Still, there was a flicker of satisfaction in her look. Derek's crew had quietly drifted away like he was contagious. Nobody wanted to stand near the guy who'd just been publicly wrecked by the boss. "I think," Michelle said into the silence, "that wraps up tonight's entertainment. Let's all go home and regroup on Monday." People started to move, slowly at first, then quicker once they realized they could finally escape and start spreading the story. I walked out to slow claps, real ones, not sarcastic. The intern started, his friend joined, and soon the younger staff joined in. The senior ones looked torn but gave small nods. The cool night air hit my face as I stepped outside. It felt better than anything in that room. Behind me, the whispers started. "That's the owner," one voice said. "Oh my God, Derek's done," another replied. I pulled out my phone to text my driver, Victor. He showed up in under 30 seconds. "Evening, sir," he said with a small grin. Good event? Educational, I said, sliding into the leather seat. We learned our CEO's allergic to humility, accountability, and basic decency, but the shrimp cocktail was decent. Victor actually laughed. Should I have HR send a goodbye basket? Add tissues, I said. Make it heartfelt. Want the scenic route home or need to get back fast? Scenic, I decided. I need 20 minutes to figure out how to explain that I crashed her party and wrecked her boss's career. Try opening with "he deserved it," Victor said. Help set the moral tone. Victor, you're both a driver and a philosopher, I told him. I checked my messages. Chris had sent 7 texts, each one louder than the last. Michelle just wrote, "Well played, sir," with a wine glass emoji. Rachel said we need to talk. Period at the end. In wife language, that meant I was in trouble. Rachel came home around 11:30, later than usual. Her makeup was smudged, mascara streaking down her cheeks, her hair coming loose. Her voice was soft. Why didn't you tell me you own the company? It wasn't angry, just confused and hurt. That stung more than yelling would have. I told her sometimes the best way to see someone's real character is to step out of the spotlight and watch how they act when they think you're nobody. She started crying, really crying, and sank onto the arm of the couch. I was just embarrassed, she said. All night I was embarrassed. For you, for me, for us. She looked up, eyes red. I didn't want people thinking I married you for money, that I slept my way to my job, that everything I've worked for is just because my husband owns the damn company. That was Rachel, fiercely independent. She'd built her career long before we met. Now everyone would question if her promotions were earned or gifted. I told her softly she deserved everything she'd achieved, that she's brilliant and respected. Derek was the one who didn't deserve his position. She shook her head. That's not how it'll look. By Monday, everyone will be whispering, I'll just be the boss's wife now. Everything I do will seem fake. Trying to lighten it, I said. Don't worry, by tomorrow they'll assume you run HR after Derek's resignation hits LinkedIn. Her glare could have melted steel. Too soon, I admitted. But come on, the joke was right there. She tried not to, but the corner of her mouth twitched. By Monday, Derek's resignation email hit inboxes like fireworks. Chris kept me posted. 8:47 a.m., emails out. He used synergy 3 times in the first paragraph. It hurts to read. Break room's packed. Someone brought donuts. People are printing it out, sir. They're laminating it. The board sent congratulatory emails. The chairman called it a graceful intervention. Another wrote, long overdue. Michelle sent a fruit basket with expensive scotch and a card that said worth every penny of the catering budget. Patricia from HR sent a meme of someone walking away from an explosion with my name on it. I didn't even know Patricia knew what memes were. But the real aftermath happened at home. Sunday morning, over pancakes, Rachel apologized again. I wasn't embarrassed of you, she said. Just the situation. I shouldn't have made you feel like you did something wrong. Derek was an idiot and someone had to stop him. I just wish it hadn't been so public. I said I should have warned her. She squeezed my hand. Next time you decide to reveal you're secretly Batman, she said, smiling a little, maybe send a text like, hey honey, planning to destroy your boss tonight. We both laughed, and I knew we'd be okay. The next week was a weird mix of chaos and normal life. Rachel said the office was split. Some thought I was a hero. Some thought I was dramatic. Others were just happy to have gossip. People treated her differently, not badly, just differently. Sarah from marketing asked if she should curtsy when she sees you, Rachel said one night. Derek from sales wants a word about his commission. Jenny from accounting asked if we're hiring. Give it time, I told her. They'll get used to it. You're still the same person doing great work. By Thursday, Michelle was officially named interim CEO. Her first move was a company-wide email about rebuilding trust and real teamwork. Friday, a reporter called asking for comment on leadership. Off the record, I said. It's a reminder that leadership's about respect, not hierarchy. On the record, Hayes Industries is committed to a culture of mutual respect. That evening, I found Rachel on the couch. Next time you invite me to your office events, I said, remember, I pay the caterer. She groaned, half annoyed, half amused. You're banned, she said, laughing. I'm putting your picture at security. Too late, I said. I own security too. She threw a pillow. I caught it. And in that moment, with my wife laughing and the chaos fading, I realized something. Revenge isn't always loud. Sometimes it's about showing up when no one expects you, refusing to shrink, standing in a room full of people who doubted you and letting them realize, slowly, painfully, that they never had a clue who you really were. It's smiling through their arrogance, stacking every insult like dry wood, then striking the match when the time's right. Sure, I could have handled it quietly, been the bigger person. But then what? No lesson learned, no story told. Revenge isn't always destruction. Sometimes it's calm, confident, and well-timed. It's being underestimated, then revealing you're the one who signs the checks, owns the building, and bought the shrimp cocktail. And if that makes me petty, fine. I'm a petty man with a company, a wife who only mostly hates me, and a framed laminated copy of Derek's resignation letter hanging in my office. I can live with that.